other policies within such period as may be specified in the order. So that is exactly the word in the proposed Infectious Disease Act. And then if you look at my order at my right hand, you will see a snippet copy from the Singapore Infectious Disease Act. It is word for word, even number for number. You see Article 47.1, and here you see 47.1. If you read it, it's word for word. Okay. Then the next one is a vaccination. He said no vaccination shall be carried out except by a medical practitioner or by a nurse or any other suitably trained person employed by or working under the supervision of a medical practitioner. So he spelled out how the vaccination could be carried out. And when you compare this with what you have with the Singapore infectious disease, it is word for word, it is verbatim. Okay. Now the third one is how the enforcement powers of the center in dealing in powers of the center in just give me a moment. I think I have a lot of blah. Powers of the center in dealing with outbreaks and suspected outbreaks of infectious disease. So he stated the powers that the Director General has for the purpose of investigating into any outbreak or suspected outbreak of an infectious disease, or for the purpose of preventing the spread of possible outbreak of an infectious disease. The Director General or any authorized health officer may, at any time, without warrant, and with such force as may be necessary, enter, inspect, and search any premises, or store, board, inspect, and search any conveyance in which the outbreak or suspected outbreak has taken place. You can take samples, you can take substance, you can take anything just to give him the. So now he doesn't need a warrant. He doesn't need to go to court, and then he can, once he suspect, he can send out the soldiers to make this happen. Okay. Now, if you compare with the Singapore Infectious Disease Act, it's verbatim, word for word. Okay. So the next one is the extraordinary powers in relation to emergency measures. So the director may, with the approval of the minister, formulate and implement emergency measures for the control of an infectious disease in any area, and such measures shall be published as before implementation. Now, the word is, it has to be published in the Gazette before implementation. Now, if you compare it with what we have with the Singaporean extraordinary powers in relation to emergency power, is verbatim. Singapore says $10,000. I'm sure what they basically did was to convert equivalent of $10,000 to 1 million naira. Okay, word for word. I'm not aware of the exchange rate. Exception. So the minister may, subject to such conditions and for such period or periods as he thinks fit, exempt any person, premises, vessel. That means the minister can say, look, do not vaccinate this particular area, or do not do this. No, he can do that as exception. Okay. To exercise power, the powers of the president under this act shall be exercisable by him or any minister designated by him in that behalf, and references in the act to the governor. These are the powers of the president to make that happen. Now, one of the things that was in the Singaporean bill that is not here is other written law not affected. The Singaporean said, except so far as may be expressly provided in this act, nothing in this act shall be construed so as to limit or affect in any way the provisions of any other written law. So what that means is that the Singaporeans also brought about the other laws. So if their disease act goes against other law, the relevant laws will take effect. But that is not in the proposed infectious act for the Nigerians. Okay. Now, what is missing? Now, the Singaporean Act made a case for a national public health research, where the director may, if he considers it to be in the public interest, from time to time undertake or facilitate any research that the director thinks is necessary to increase or acquire new knowledge on, or to discover or create new or improve material, devices, processes, or products for the detection, prevention, and treatment of any infectious disease, any other disease which is or which the appropriate minister. So what this basically means is that for the Singaporean Infectious Disease Act, they don't need to wait for an infection to happen. Okay, there will be an ongoing national public health research funded by the government, that would make research and probably also try to find a prevention mechanism or treatment for infectious disease. That particular one is obviously missing in the Nigerian Infectious Disease Act. Okay. So now the Singaporean government actually made a gazette of a temporary measures to tackle COVID-19, and this was done on Thursday, April 9, 2020. If you check at the gazette that they made provisions for the fact that the lockdown and any other measures taken by government might cause people to maybe violate their contractual agreement, go into insolvency, and all that. So they put in place measure by law that will protect you as an individual. If I've got into a contractual agreement and by virtue of the fact that the country or the state was locked down, I was unable to execute it, I will be exonerated, and then I need to renegotiate that. So they made a gazette that handles and quite other things, including insolvency, restructuring of loans, and all that. Quite very detailed. I do not think we have such. Maybe if we do, the relevant personnel in this room can bring that to our attention. Now, what I also did was to look at the World Health Organization. There's a write-up that they made on advancing the right to health, the vital rule of law, and I have tried to extract the main relevant that says that public health laws should also include procedural rights to protect the interests of individuals subject to treatment orders. So, if the Director General or the Minister makes an order for a compulsory treatment of vaccination of a particular group of people, what they are saying that the public health law should also make procedural to include procedural rights to protect the interests of individuals. This may include the requirement for a court to review each compulsory treatment order within a defined period of time. Public health officials must ensure that laws authorizing treatment without consent are never used to discriminate against or to marginalize vulnerable individuals or groups. This is a recommendation of the World Health Organization. I do not see that in the current Infectious Disease Act. Once that order is given, there's no way that order can be. Let's assume the order is given and is effected. Okay, there's no way for you to go back and examine that order to see if it is the right order or if it was given with malicious intent and all that.
So can you please let's quickly round up?
Okay, so that's basically what that is. So the next areas was the powers that the Infectious Disease Act gave to the president. There is no mention. There is a mention of governor, but the power basically resides on the president. There is no governor, no ministers, no anybody the president assigns could actually execute that power. I do not know the role of governors in this. And when you look at the Singapore that Nigeria has copied, they are running a parliamentary system. They have a ceremonial president, prime ministers and cabinet, and a unicameral parliament. In their own Infectious Disease Act, there is no role for their president. It is the Minister of Health that does that, and then he reports to the president. And when you compare statistics between the Singapore and Nigeria, Singapore has a population of just 5.6 million, with a per capita of 64,000 US dollars, while Nigeria have a population of 195 million with a per capita of 2,000 US dollars. You could see what the massive range is. So, in conclusion, if you look at Singapore with the way they are currently set up, they are Nigeria in 1960, where we have a parliamentary kind of system with cabinet ministers giving powers to executing without any role for the president. But the way it is in Nigeria, the president is the almighty, has all that it takes to do. So that's my presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay, so thank you very much, Marcel. Thank you for that presentation. Now, I will be calling on the Professor Joseph Igieteme, Doctor of Immunology and Microbiology from Georgetown University. Please, can you indicate within the meeting, and can you raise your hand so we can unmute you? I cannot find Professor here. Can you raise up your hand so that we can unmute you, Prof? One more time, Prof, if you can hear me, can you raise up your hand so I can mute you, please? There is a technology within the system. You can basically click on it. It raises your hand, then I will know. I guess you didn't join with your name because I can't find the name here. Okay, so while Prof is getting ready, then I will be calling on Professor, the guest speaker today, Professor Maurice Iwu. Prof, are you here as well?
Can you hear me?
Professor, yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. First of all, I enjoyed the last presentation, just the one that just finished. And to say that surely the act is going to be passed. And so the more we scrutinize what is within it, the better for all of us. So it is really good that our people are showing an interest in it. The second thing I'd like to add in that advice is the fact that going by what is happening in the Senate and National Assembly, that organizations such as yours should be able to have people debate these issues clause by clause, because this is exactly how a lot of the laws that have been passed that were not in our interest pass through. Having said that, let me then concentrate on the very major gain that we may get from the present pandemic, namely that it will lead us to a situation where we'll do a self-discovery, where we'll be able to look inwards and try to solve our own problems. I think it has now dawned on us that nobody out there is looking out for us. We have to be able to analyze issues on our own and find ways to be able to solve our own problems. The coronavirus first came into prominence in 2003, 2004, when we had SARS epidemic in China. SARS stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome, coronavirus. When it happened, it was limited to Asia, particularly China. They did a few things and they tried to get themselves together. America helped them a lot. A lot of the help they got was essentially from the West. Secondly, there had been a very long collaboration between Wuhan and the institutes in the US, particularly with Walter Reed Center, what is called US Army Research Institute for Infectious Diseases at Fort Detrick. So when both sides are trading blames, it is actually a divorce case here, where people who have worked very closely together are trying to stay apart, and things are likely bound to happen. When we had the Ebola epidemic or Ebola outbreak in 2014, 2015, it was a shocker because Ebola wasn't at that time a West African virus. It was centered mainly in Central Africa and some parts of East Africa. So when it hit us, it was really a very big shock. So some of us who had some interest in drug development decided to then test compounds that we have found active earlier to retest them again, whether they are still active. Because in 1999 thereabout, we had tested some compounds found in Nigeria and West Africa. We tested over 2,000 compounds when there was a mad rush to find a cure or a treatment for Ebola. At that time, BBC, CNN, all the major news media carried it because there was no compound that was ever isolated, either from nature or synthesized, that was able to stop the replication of the virus. When it comes to treatment of viral infections, the objective here is not to cure. The objective is to stop or reduce the replication of the virus so that the individual person will then be able to build up antibodies and then be able to survive the virus. So that the interest at the time was actually to find compounds or compound or a drug that will be able to feed this bill. It is interesting to note that at that time, chloroquine, a compound called acrylivac, which is the active compound of beta cola, A compound that we also found in a plant called Andrographis paniculata. A compound we also found in another plant that is a very bitter compound, which is a compound called astonin. These are very well-known compounds. So we tested them at the time and found them active against Ebola. That was our primary interest. When then it came for the turn of for us to test against other viruses, coronavirus was already a conquered virus, so there was not much interest. But then we found that it was very active against SARS, more active against SARS than it was active against Ebola. And we also tested against dengue fever. Our approach was very simple, that we were conscious of the fact that these viral infections at the time didn't occur in the West, so that it was necessary for us to look inwards to see what we can have against the tropical diseases, orphan diseases, orphan in the sense that they are diseases that attack Africans or very poor people. So we were lucky that we had compounds that could be used at that time for treatment of Ebola. What we then did in 2014, 2015 was to expand the scope, and then included dengue fever, included the coronavirus, that is SARS at the time. So when then in 2019, there was this epidemic, and then it was epidemic in China. We are kind of studying it, and nobody ever thought it was going to go beyond the borders of China, because it has happened before. So when then in 2020, it rose to the level of becoming wider spread, then it was not a pandemic. That was when I actually had to contact the Federal Minister of Science and Technology and the Minister of Health, the Minister of State for Health, and then talk to them and say, gentlemen, we have a problem here. If this virus is has left China and it's in other shores, that it may become some pandemic. But luckily for us, that we have a compound that is homegrown, which we can use to arrest the replication of this virus. And that what is also more, that the test was done by the United States National Institute of Health. They have a very powerful virology laboratory. And I did explain why it was not possible to do such work in our own laboratory, because you needed a certain level of biosafety to conduct such a very hazardous work. So we had a network. So we could rely on what we have, they don't have, what they have, we don't have. And the network worked very beautifully. I also did explain that I'm associated with a pharmaceutical company. I'm in the board of NIMET, and I'm about one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies that will be able to take the product to the marketplace and to our people if we can pass through the development process, which normally takes time. But what is also good about that, 3 of the compounds that we did isolate at the time, 2 were more active than the 3rd one, but the 3rd one had some advantage. Because when the Chinese had their problem of upper respiratory tract infection, they had subjected this compound, the plant that yielded the compound, in 33 clinical studies involving 7,145 patients. And so we had a history of human use here. So what we needed to do was to fast track the process and then have a drug, what we call active pharmaceutical ingredient, that will be in the marketplace. Then the story got even more interesting in the sense that in 2016, we registered a product through NAFDAC, a tea, an ordinary tea that contained the active ingredient, the plant that yielded these two substances. So those were merged into a product we called IHP detox tea. So I did explain to the ministers that up to now, we have not had one single adverse effect. And luckily that the 3 plants concerned are all edible plants. In fact, what one of the tricky thing about is that one of the leaves that we use in the tea is ordinary guava leaf. It's actually one of the leaves that is in the tea. So I said that what we could do, since it's already been approved by NAFDAC, is to convert it into an instant tea, in which case you do pre-extraction and reconvert it back into a tea so that people take it in a precise dose and then there will be a drug. Then what you then ask, what is then stopping us from doing that? Is the whole idea that sometimes we don't really know when something is supposed to be a guideline and when it's supposed to be a law. Most of the issues that happen to do with drug development are guidelines, and that you are supposed to then follow those guidelines to suit your peculiar situation in your own country or in your own section of the world. So we are lucky then that we had a NAFDAC system, we had an ethical clearance system. So what I did was to call some professors from Nnamdi University, where I worked with them in the past, they have done clinical trials for us in the past, and say, gentlemen, to be able to have credibility to what we are doing, it would be better to have an independent group to look at our data to then look at and see whether it's something you can do. It didn't take them 24 hours, and they got back to me and said, Prof, we can actually do a clinical trial on this. This is really so good to be true. They applied to a continent-wide clearinghouse, which is Pan-African Center for Clinical Trials, so that it must be registered before you can use the product, which they did. Then we're now in process of trying to, first of all, interest the government and not, because doing a clinical trial in this short period and it's going to be something that, because of the nature of the sensitivity of the illness concerned, you must make sure it is kosher, that all the laws are obeyed, and that the patient's own human rights is not violated, or anything that will suggest that they're being used as guinea pigs. We must have to follow all the protocol, but the difference that it had to be faster. And all that we needed was just that coming together and people coming, supporting that whole effort. But that didn't happen. But luckily, again, only yesterday we had a virtual meeting with NAFDAC, where they were saying that if you are going to do just 2 centers, that they can fast track some of the activities and make them shorter. And I passed that message to the professors, the clinical professors who are concerned. The idea here that the compound we are talking about is called andrographolide. It is well studied. There are over 1,000 publications on just that compound alone. So everything about its safety, pharmacokinetics, its mode of action is well known. So it has been studied for its anti-malarial property. It has been studied for its activity against other viruses. And as I said, NIMET is well prepared to be able to introduce into the marketplace. Again, luckily, we do have the T, which is already licensed and registered by NAFDAC, and which people, those who know and they're buying and taking it, because it has the possibility of being a prophylactic. As I also mentioned, the COV1 and COV2, this pandemic now is called by COV2. They have so much in common that their points of difference is not that much. Even the site where they attack the cell, this human cell, are similar. So we are more or less so sure that COV1 remedy will also work for COV2, but that has to be tested. That has to be tried in proper clinical setting. And as I said at the beginning of my presentation, the good thing that may happen from this pandemic is that it will force us to be able to look inwards, to use what we have to solve our problem. Because right now there is a mindset that except if we are helped, we cannot help ourselves. That whenever we're in trouble, that the first reaction is for us to shout so that people can come and help us, not to see what we can do to help ourselves. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Prof. That is a very wonderful insight that you have given us. And I would, before we go further, I would want people to ask questions. But before they do, I have a question and I want to open the floor. Please, for house rule, if you want to ask any question, please, can you first raise your hand so we know the moderators will see you when you raise your hand, they will allow you to come in. Prof, my question goes as follows. We know what Madagascar have done, and we see the progress they've made. As you rightly pointed towards the end of your presentation, you said that once things happen, we kind of raise our hands to be helped. Now, the engagement you've had so far, COVID didn't start today. It's about 5 months now that we know about it. Does it mean that within the last 5 months, the drugs or the treatments that you and your team have, there has not been any form of approval, or are people preventing you? So, I mean, we have people with COVID. Is it not possible that you liaise with the government, you get in to, administer this, mixture, medication, whatever it is, to these people? Is it not possible, Prof?
No, it is not possible to do that for 2 reasons. One, that the patients are really quarantined by government. So they're actually government patient, the actual official patient. So there has to be something that is taken and done from a national point of view. Second reason is that it is unethical to give anybody on unapproved drug, even if it's on a one-on-one basis. So what you can only do is what we are doing, namely the one that has gone through NAFDAC. We make it available for those who want to buy them and take them and so on. That would be T, which, as I say, can be a prophylactic, can be taken as a prophylactic against viruses, not necessarily for COVID-19, but it is one of the viruses that is active against. But there is a huge difference between what happened in Madagascar and what we're talking about. The Madagascar product is a herbal medicine. We're talking about standardized, properly articulated drug, a medicine. It happened to have come from plant. So we are kind of surprised why there wasn't any willingness to more or less embrace this work we have done. We have also not comparing what we are doing with other. There are a lot of people who are coming out with cures and saying that they can treat this and treat that. They are based it on literature. But we actually tested the compounds against SARS coronavirus, and we then sent it back to America for validation again. And so in terms of antiviral activity, there's no doubt. So but as I said, when it comes to drug development, you must, the final proof is that you have tested it on the patient, and then that it cure the patient or not. And that on its own is something that is usually very expensive to start with. But not only just that, it is also something that has to go through a lot of regulatory processes. But all that can be abridged within a very short time if there's that political will, if there's that willingness, if there's that plan to actually go beyond just the ordinary. I think that is just even in the US, as sophisticated as they are. When Trump wanted them to use chloroquine, the professional, the FDA, they had a long struggle, but because they knew that the boss has made up his mind that he must try this treatment option, and that was exactly what happened.
So, just as a quick follow-up, so are you saying if we just oppose Nigerian's case to that of the US, if the president, by any chance, says he's going to be like Trump and say, okay, let's try what Professor Maurice Iwu has produced for us. Are you saying that it is something that is likely to work for us?
Oh, yes. And what is also, as I said, we did everything the proper way. We have a patent. And the whole process of patenting, that you disclose all you know. So there's not even a secret that I'm keeping. And we are even not even interested in letting people use medicine. No. They have research centers. They can take the recipe, they can take the formulation, they can take how we have made it and make it in one of the institutes. We are more interested in saving lives. So there is even not the question of coming to me, no, because we have made it public. The structures are well known, the compounds are well studied. So there are nothing, I don't know, maybe I'm not communicating properly to them. There's not even no need to come back to us, because there is a patent, but there is also a law that says if you want to save human life, you can bypass the patent. If there is an issue, if there's national emergency here, they can be able to now say, look, one of our own centers, either University of Ibadan or University of Lagos or National Institute of Medical Research, please go and see Prof. Iwu and then get whatever other data. I'm even compelled by law to be able to let them have that. So there is this, I'm not saying that it must be us. I'm not asking that, please, can you test Prof. Iwu's medicine? No. We have made it public. It's a public knowledge. And what we also did, as soon as we were sure of our fact, we sent in a paper to Nature. Nature is the most rigorous form that you want to be able to publish in my area. We could have just gone to one of our own sectional journal, but we didn't do that. We decided to make it public because something so simple could be so effective for us is a novelty there. And it is not a question of patronizing Professor. No. There is an idea. The concept is public. So we thought that at this stage it becomes a national issue. We have done our bit. As I keep saying, science is like tennis. You play it out there, expecting somebody to play it back. And then that is how science grows. But if you now play the ball and then it's just like a squash and then it's only the wall that you're actually hitting at, doesn't really
okay. So thank you very much, Prof. I think we have two questions here. One question, the first one is coming from Mr. Otumbo. So, Mr. Otumbo, you have the floor now.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. The situation, let me start by saying well done to the academic presentation, the first one we had. That sounds very good, well put together. But my own problem with all this is it looks like a bill that is going to die at the arrival because of we cannot match the infrastructure of Singapore. Here we have a country, as we speak, that we are yet to provide basic infrastructure that will support any efforts we make by people like Professor Iwu and many others. We are still lacking behind. So the question is, isn't it correct to say that people like Professor Iwu and many others have not done enough to move Nigeria beyond where we are today? Because we are still like, we are retarded. We can't move forward beyond this. Here is Professor Wu having problems, having to deal with corruption, having to deal with different kind of things within the country where he's trying to represent. That's my question. That's my observation.
Okay, thank you very much. That's an observation. And I have Clifford. Clifford, you have the floor now.
Thank you very much, Chief, for the opportunity. I really enjoyed the presentation from Prof. Maurice Iwu. But I would want to find out from Prof what is actually the limitation from the trial of this drug in Nigeria. Since Prof has come up with enough evidence to show the effectiveness of this particular compound against some of both epidemic and the current pandemic which the world is experiencing today. We know from other nations that each time a novel idea comes up, governments are always open to welcome that idea, partner with the initiator of that idea, and then give it a trial. For whatever that is not tried cannot be effectively established, whether it will work or not work. And science is all about trial. Science is not anything that you just come up and then you develop and it's there. Everything is by trial. Even this technology we are using, the Zoom network we are using today, the person who developed it had to try it first. And then others had to try it and confirm that it is able to work. And that is why we are all enjoying it today. So everything scientific is about opportunity to try it. So I want Prof to please explain to us the exact limitation he is having from the government side and what he suggests that should be done. And if it is done, either by government or by company partnerships, then this particular compound will be given opportunity to be tried within our own atmosphere. Thank you very much.
Prof, let's do the following, because I think I've seen many people raising hands now. Let's basically take these questions. Prof, if you can jot it down, I don't know if you've got pen and paper.
Mr. Maziozo, if I can interject now, we have some other speakers waiting. I would like to believe that the Prof will stay with us till the end of the meeting, so that we wouldn't spend all our time answering questions when the other speakers are waiting to speak. Will it be possible to have all the speakers make their presentation and then we'll start taking questions?
Prof, are you okay with that?
Yes, I'm very okay with that.
Oh, okay, then thank you very much. So let's crack on. On that note, I think we had the Prof from the US who was supposed to be with us, but I think there are some issues with time. And, you know, we still bring him on anyway. So I think, hold on. I think, is he here now? No, okay. So, but he's been trying to log on. Now, on that note, what we want, let's just move from the academic part of this discussion this evening. Let's move into the reality. We will, please hold your questions, hold your ammunitions. We will have time to come back to all this. Now, in doing this, we have the Honorable Akani Dolapo Badro, who is the Lagos Inland Federal Constituency Chairman, House Committee on Industry. Then we have the Daniel Bwala, who is also the special advisor on legal and constitutional matters to the Deputy President of the Senate, also head of the legal unit, and also Dubem Okadibo Moralo, Esquire. So I want to give the floor now to Honorable Akani Dolapo Bedro. Afterwards, Daniel Bwala, please get ready. So if Honorable Akani is here, can you raise your hand so that we can unmute you? I can't see, sorry? Hold on, Honorable Akani, are you here? You know, the reason why I'm saying if you can raise up your hand to know is I have people that have come in and that's what happens. I will lower everybody's hand, please, for now so that we don't get this confusion. What is happening sometimes for these meetings, if you join in without putting your name, it's going to be very hard for us to know who is on there. So I can see people having Samsung iPhones, we wouldn't know who is behind that. So please, if we have Honorable Akani Dolapo, can you please raise your hand? Okay, on that note, he's not, I mean, let me go to the next person, that is Mr. Daniel Bwala. Mr. Daniel Bwala, you are now on, I've removed your mute. You're welcome. Mr. Bwala.
It's an honor to be here, and we've been having a very constructive engagement, beginning with the first speaker, and Professor Maurice Iwu also did a very good justice. In fact, I was looking forward to really hearing from him, because from the day I read that he has interesting ideas to the solution we're seeking for, I felt very excited about it. It's a shame that we have not heard the government taking a very massive step in supporting that cause. Because the way everything is going, bioterrorism, bio this, bio that, solution to every problem will have to be homegrown. Otherwise, the future will be bleak. Well, as a lawyer, I want to look at it from the perspective of law, and especially the proposed bill. Let me clear the doubt of people, because there are lots of, I wouldn't say conspiracy theory, but narrative that is built in the air that has now led to lots of people taking a firm decision to kill this bill, as though the bill is a problem to the country. I remember many times, I think about 3-4 weeks ago, when we talked about the need for a law to be enacted that will replace the Quarantine Act, because quite frankly, quite a number of provisions in the Quarantine Act are obsolete and outdated. They are not realistic, especially if you look at the enforcement part, the monetary value of punishment. It is not realistic. If you look at the declaration of proclamation by the president, and then how that will be enforced. If you look at it practically, you will see that, I don't know in Lagos and other parts of the country, but in Abuja, we have mobile courts moving everywhere and trying people summarily for disobeying orders and sentencing them, some to community punishment and some to fine. And the question has been asked, under what law are you trying them? Under what law are you punishing them? Because if you say you're drawing then your authority from the regulation of government and then the Quarantine Act, other questions come as to whether what you're trying there for amounts to a crime, if the punishment is that which might lead to imprisonment. And if it's a crime, then the question further is whether the executive can enact a law that will define a crime and prescribe a punishment, or whether that power solely lies within the powers of the legislature. But for my own part, I'm looking at it from the perspective that the principal aim of every law is to cure a mischief. So what are the mischiefs that we're all confronted by as a result of this pandemic situation in the country? And lots of people are looking at it from the enforcement perspective. I, for one, hold the belief that our law enforcement agents have not had the challenge of enforcing the law. From when I was born till date, I've always known that our law enforcement will rather be excessive in enforcing laws. And so if the essence of the infectious disease control bill is to give so much power to the police in carrying out the regulations of government in the meantime, then in my view, the act is defeated. What I look at is, and we can borrow that from jurisdiction. I don't have a problem that a part of, I don't have a problem that we try to borrow from the Singapore law. However, my challenge or concern is that the law which we're seeking or which we copied and we are looking forward to enacting existed or was enacted over 43 years ago. And even if you look at the World Health Organization policy program for carrying out regulation by member states in dealing with pandemic, you see that most of the provision with regards to enforcement, with regards to the human rights, and balancing that with the need for the government to bring about control to cure the disease or to contain the disease, they are far apart with the Singapore law. So that's why I believe that that law from Singapore is inapplicable and cannot stand the test of time. There is also the human rights dimension with the law, which has to do with, for example, some parts of the bill states that the health officer or the law enforcement can, without warrant, if he forms the opinion that a meeting or somebody confined in a place is unauthorized because of infectious disease, they can then take certain measures that are necessary. Human rights advocates have challenged that, and they believe that you can get what they call a warrant from the court or the magistrate. If you have mobile courts moving here and there, then what stops you from getting a warrant from the mobile court, so to speak, if the law is necessarily made? Then what about the socio-economic aspect? Because, for example, the United States, they have the U.S. Public Health Service Act. They have so many other laws in various states. But if you notice, after the advent of this pandemic situation in America, what they quickly did was for the Congress to enact what they call the CARE Act. You see, because the COVID-19 is attacking two-pronged areas. One is the health aspect, which is bringing mortality rate all over the world. Then the other part is the economic. And so what America did in order to cushion the effect was to pass the CARE Act, thereby empowering the Congress to then bring in money, stimulus into the economy, and then to see how they can take care of people who are likely to lose their jobs, people who are in businesses that by virtue of this situation, they are going to be down. And so I feel that if we are bringing in infectious disease control bill, should look at that area. Now, I must laud the president for the effort he has taken in ensuring that from the National Reserve, from the food bank, they send money here and there, we have donations from people, then you have the task force working. But it is not defined, it is not ascertainable, and it has generated a lot of controversy. But these are the areas that I believe in the bill we need to introduce it. So that, for instance, there will be a provision that where the health, in this case, the NCDC, declare a health emergency in the country, it will trigger two things. Number one, the president can then declare national emergency, which will then give the president enormous powers to use the resources of the government to deal with the situation. And in fact, to even go a step further and use the national, what we call the Nigerian army, to come and help the health workers, the frontliners, and people who are in the line of this job. Because you see, without declaration of emergency, human rights issues and questions then arises. But when you declare national emergency, it is understandable and it is globally accepted, even under international law, that certain human rights can be suspended for the purposes of containing that situation. So that is the executive part of what will happen if this law is made. Then the other part is that it will then trigger the National Assembly to then pass a relief act, which can be called a national emergency relief or whatever is the nomenclature, but then the relief act, so that money will be appropriated from the port of the country for that purpose. Now, here lies the question. We are all at home. Some of us who are from the private sector find it difficult sustaining staff salary because we do not generate the income. What is the policy of government to cushion the effect so we don't sack people who work for us? Then if you go to public service, there is this report of banks wanting to sack people and reduce the salary. If there is a stimulus package injected by the government within this period, they can keep the employment. Then people who are into manufacturing, because going forward, I see a situation where we will have to have domestic measures of producing our PPE. Imagine we're relying on PPE coming from abroad, and then you have to wait till everybody dies. So we're going to encourage, and how is the government acting in that capacity to encourage local production, and especially in the event of a situation like that? So these are issues that I believe that will trigger the mind of the lawmakers, and then we have to look into it, because if you don't legislate it, it becomes difficult for then government to act. Because another point that I would like to stress is that if you take out the powers of the court, where somebody can challenge an act of government, even in the midst of emergency situation, then you are invariably attacking democracy, because anything and everything that is carried out, believed to have been carried out, or is about to be carried out under the guise of law must be tested by the court. The court must be there to settle the issue. So many people have lost their lives. So many people have been maimed on the streets on the account of not obeying a law that is not properly defined and it is not clarified to the people. Then we need sensitization. So, for example, if you look at the NCDC Act, to me, it is like a substantive law. Then what we are about to do, which is the repeal and the replacement of the Quarantine Act, then becomes procedural. I don't think NCDC has a problem understanding the scope of their work, and it is quite elaborate. So people who argue that because there is in existence NCDC Act, therefore there is no need for the repeal and the replacement, are probably misconstruing it, because that act is an establishment act that clearly defines what NCDC will do in the event like that. But then we need procedural law that will then talk about what ought to be done and how we need to do it in a situation like that. These are areas I believe that we should challenge our mind as we look to it, because I'm sure when next the public hearing comes, this is part of what people are going to generate conversation. And some people will want to kill it. So whoever the sponsor, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and thankfully, I've had a couple of interactions with him. He is very open to whatever amendment that is needed necessarily, but never to kill the bill. And I am not in support of the idea of killing the bill, but I am firmly in support of us remodeling. One last thing before I yield to the next speaker is the issue of vaccination. It has generated controversy. In fact, it's the crux of the argument, because in this bill, it is said that vaccination will be mandatory. And then this bill is also, well, people behind it also believe that even in the UK, that's the provision you find, that there is mandatory vaccination. And the other parts of the world are also copying it. And that singular element in the bill has now given birth to what we see, and people classify as a conspiracy theory, that somebody who is funding the NCDC wants to introduce vaccination and they want to change Africa. You may have been hearing it at your own end. In my view, vaccination should never be mandatory by the act, by the bill when it becomes a law. It should be optional, just in the same way we had when we had cholera, smallpox, chickenpox, and all of that. It was optional. What we need to take care of it is orientation. And that is where you have the machineries of government that are in charge, tasked with the responsibility of national orientation to give people the proper orientation. Then you have the religious angle. The act says when somebody dies after it is believed he dies probably of COVID-19, then the burial of that person will be carried out by the government and not under any form of religious rite, including wakekeeping. To me, we need to look at it critically and tinker. We must find a way of ensuring that the law is made in such a way that it does not trample on religious rights, and at the same time, it does not lead to the spread of the virus. These are some of the areas that is agitating people's mind. Let me yield to the next speaker.
Thank you very much. Now we are going to take the next speaker, Honorable Akani Dolapo. Now, Honorable, I've removed your mute.
Yes.
Now go ahead.
Thank you very much. Let me first start by saying that there's a lot to this bill, because just like the last speaker said, a lot of the criticism may not have been on merit, but on conspiracy theories. Fine, there are a lot of things that need to be changed about the law. And there are a lot of things. People have complained about plagiarism, which I agree with to some extent. But in so many cases, we need to search ourselves. We cannot compare the way we behave with the way some normal people behave. Look, for instance, about 3 days ago, last week, when the partial lockdown was lifted, you never expected people who are in their right minds to behave in the way people behaved. So we need, as a matter of fact, to put some things in place to be able to correct all these ills, or else we just keep on talking and talking and talking and nothing will happen. We need laws that fit our communities and our society. Even as Africans, we need laws that fit our community and our culture. The average Nigerian, when he gets to the Republic of Benin, just next door, behaves very well. But when he is in Nigeria, he wants to flout every law available. Why is that? So apart from orientation, I think law enforcement too has been zero, because in the past few days too, there is lockdown from every state. And you see people who left Lagos and being stopped in Abuja. How did they get there? The law enforcement agents are at every border. So we have a lot of things and a lot of catch up to do. And number one, about this bill. You see, in an emergency situation, notwithstanding, don't get me wrong, please, notwithstanding, if you even leave out the jurisdiction of the court, when the law is made, anybody can challenge it at any time. Anybody can challenge it at any time. And moreover, I want us to know that in this instance, if you don't probably put some force, some type of strong language in the law, our people will not succumb. I'm not in any way saying that that is the correct thing to do, but in some instances, you need to use the hard tactics to get what you want to be done. We see people who are COVID-19 positive, who are already receiving treatment, escaping from the treatment centers. And do you now tell me that you want to go to court to go and bring that person back? There must be some type of law that you now have to forcibly arrest that person and take him back for confine him for treatment, because it's not about him only, it's about infecting all other members of the society. So there are a lot of things that are being misconstrued about this bill. I accept there are issues, and during the public debate, all those ones will be ironed out. And again, there's another one in the Senate. Everything will now be consolidated, and at the public hearing, everybody will have to bring in and chip whatever it is done, whatever is supposed to be done. And let me just chip in about burial. What NCDC says is that they are not saying that you cannot bury your dead when it's when the person dies of COVID COVID-19. They want to give you the protocol to follow and the procedure to follow before they can release the dead body to you. That is what they said, because they came to Parliament about some days ago, and this question came up. And they did not say you cannot have your dead body. What they said is that they will not release the dead body to you unless they are very, very sure that you follow the mandatory steps that they have issued out. That's another thing. Then I want to go to Professor Iwu, because definitely he has done a lot of work with his colleagues during the SARS epidemic and during the Ebola epidemic. Now, all those things and all those inventions and researches that they made, where did it end? Where did it end? I'm putting a question to him. Sir, do you think it is deliberate that probably because of the side of the world all these things are coming from, that the West don't want that cure to be for Africa to get the pass mark or what? Because I don't understand. When there's a situation and people get together to try to find answers, and those answers, like you said, are in public, are public knowledge, and everything is not hidden, then why are they not being progressed to a testing stage? And what is the Nigerian government doing? How far have you gone to engage the government of Nigeria to push this a step further? So that is my question to Professor Iwu. And on the last note, please. And I think that we need, as a matter of urgency, to get everybody involved. It is a total disgrace for this country to be now, after about a month plus, to be under 20,000 of COVID-19 testing. It is a total disgrace. Total disgrace. We need to up our game. And just yesterday, we were going about 300 with 18,000 in a single day. So I don't know why NCDC, if they have a problem, they should let the whole world know. If they have a problem, they should let Nigerians know. But 18,000 tested so far, honestly, I am short of words. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Honorable. And in your closing remarks, we've noted the questions you have for Professor Maurice Iwu, and I believe Professor has written the questions down. Your closing remark, you blamed the government. And thanks goodness, some of you here are part of the government. So the government is not only the executive, equally involves you guys who are within the arm of the legislature. So if we blame the government, it is a collective blame. The next speaker—
I agree.
So the next speaker, before we get to the proper meat of the matter, which is where we will now begin to take questions, and those questions that have been bothering you, please write them down that you do not forget. I am calling on Dubem Okadibo Moralu Esquire, who is the Special Assistant Research and Public Policy to the Speaker, House of Representatives. I must note here, it is very important here that that we bring him in. His boss was the one who brought in, or rather who proposed the act that is causing too much tension in the country. So he's here to represent his boss. And in this case, Dubem Okadibo, we will now give you the floor to make your own presentation. I hope you— okay, yeah, go ahead. I thought I had you now, Dubem.
Dubem registered with the name DM. Do you have it? DM.
No. No DM here.
Uh,
Okay, yeah, I've seen it. I've seen him. So, Dibemi, you can now speak.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you all for being here this evening, and I thank the organizers of this event for the vision and execution of this particular program. I want to address a few things relating to this bill so that perhaps we can achieve some clarity that allows us to move forward away from the present controversies and then focus on how we can improve the general framework for the management of infectious diseases, which is the point of this legislation. Now, the first thing I want to say is there has been a lot of talk about a lot of perhaps misunderstanding between bill and act. The first speaker who spoke referred to the Control of Infectious Diseases Bill as an act. This bill is not an act. An act is a law that has been passed by the parliament and signed by the president. This bill has not gotten that far. What we have now is a legislative proposal, because that's what a bill is. And a legislative proposal will go through a number of steps during which it will be improved on and perfected before it finally receives the necessary assent from the president. So this is a proposal. We need to keep that in mind and engage on that basis, that this is a proposal that will be improved as it makes its way through the process. Now, a lot has been made about the similarities between our bill and that of the Singaporean Infectious Diseases Act. Now, I need it to be clear for all who are on this platform at the moment that the language of plagiarism that has been attributed, that has been used in regards to this bill, is simply incendiary and is intended only to arouse certain passions. Plagiarism is not a known, is not known in legislative drafting. It is not possible for you to plagiarize an act of parliament, government edict, or court judgment. One of the principles of legislative drafting is best practice. Essentially, what that means is when you want to achieve a particular objective, the first thing you do is you ask yourself, where else in the world is there any other jurisdiction that has achieved what you intend to achieve? And if the answer to that is yes, you say, how have they achieved it? How have they achieved it in the written text? And you take that written text and use it as the foundation for your own development, for developing your own legislation and whatever sort of improvements you wish to, and you make whatever improvements you wish to make so that it is more suited to your local context. The first speaker started by highlighting the similarities and suggested that perhaps this was a verbatim replication. But towards the end of his presentation, he noted that there were places or instances where our bill differed, in fact, from the Control of Infectious Diseases Act in Singapore, because we had taken what was done in Singapore as the foundation of our work, and we had improved it and amended it to an extent that it was more suited to our own local context. Now, moving on from that, it is important to note that there is nothing that we have done in this bill or with this bill that is not based on existing law in Nigeria. We have not sought to recreate the wheel or to import into our jurisdiction practices that are unusual to us or practices that are alien to us. The Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and I need you to pay attention to this, in section 45, gives the, the government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria the right to derogate from certain principles of human rights under very limited guidelines. Section 45 of our Constitution says that, Section 45, subsection 1, nothing in sections 37, 38, 39, 40, and 41 of the Constitution shall invalidate any law that is reasonably justifiable in a democratic society in the interest of defense, public safety, public order, public morality, or public health. That is section 45. Then you now will go on to section 305, which on the section, the miscellaneous provisions, which dictate what happens during the proclamation of emergency. So we have simply sought to build on what already exists to achieve the particular objective of strengthening our framework for the management of public health. I noted some of the comments that were made by some of the other presenters, so let me address those, and I will subsequently take questions as they arise. Section 3 of this particular bill deals with the process of and the powers of the president in declaring a public health emergency. A lot of the contentious provisions that people are worried about apply only in a public health emergency. The only person under the bill who has the power to declare a public health emergency is the president. I need us to note that. We have not given the Director General power to act on his own or to act outside of norms. We have simply given him powers that come into effect subject to a declaration of a public health emergency by the president. Somebody mentioned about warrants and the power to arrest without warrant. The power to arrest without warrant is not new to our laws. The Administration of Criminal Justice Act makes reference to the power to arrest without warrant in I think in section 6 or section 54. I'm not clear at the moment what section it is. But that power to arrest without warrant already exists in our laws. Section 52 of the Administration of Criminal Justice Act grants the police express authority to execute an arrest without warrant, where a warrant, is where you cannot, it's not immediately possible for you to obtain a warrant, or where it is necessary for you to do so to prevent commission of a crime. And even under the Act, the Administration of Criminal Justice Act of the Confederation, it is only reasonable suspicion that is required. So if a police officer has reasonable suspicion based on his own idea or his own knowledge that a crime is in occurrence or a crime is about to be committed, he or she can execute an arrest without warrant. Substantively, there is no difference as far as the issue of warrants are concerned between existing law and what is being proposed in the bill. Another issue that was raised, I think, was the issue of why we did not create an exemption for other written law not affected, and the issue of the courts cannot intervene oversee the bill or when it becomes an act. That is not true. The right to appear before court is a constitutional right. The right to challenge government legislation is a constitutional right. And you cannot abrogate that right by passing a bill in parliament. There is no section of this bill, by the way, suggests any such abrogation of rights. But even if it did, it will fail very quickly, because that will be in express violation of constitutional provisions that guarantee us as Nigerian citizens the right to challenge any legislation or act of parliament in the court of law. But even within the act itself, there is clearly all the offenses in the act must be presented before a court of law. That is to say, if the NCDC director, the Director General of the NCDC, or a health officer acting under his authority were to arrest an individual for violating any of the provisions of the proposed bill, it does not mean that that arrest automatically automatically becomes subject to a fine or subject to punishment. When that arrest is conducted, you have a right to be brought before a magistrate court and to be tried in the court. And then the court can decide to find you guilty and impose the punishment prescribed by the act, or to find you not guilty, in which case you go home and continue your life. Then my brother, Barrister Daniel Bwala, he spoke about the need to, as we are making interventions relating to public health, we need to also make interventions relating to the national economy and the economic welfare of Nigerian citizens. And I agree with him 100% that both of these things must be done at the same time. And he made reference to the CARES Act, which was passed by the United States Congress. At the beginning of this particular pandemic, even before the lockdown orders were issued by the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the House of Representatives passed the emergency economic stimulus bill to help Nigerians get through this present crisis. The bill sought, amongst other things, to grant tax relief to companies who retain their staff during this crisis. The bill granted a moratorium on loans, which I understand, which was one of the things the barrister made reference to. It granted moratorium on loans, on mortgages and loans from the Federal Mortgage Bank and from the Federal Housing National Housing Fund. That bill has been passed and sent to the Senate over a month ago, and it has not even been listed in the Senate for consideration. And at some point, I would like my brother barrister to explain to us what is holding up this particular bill in the Senate and why it hasn't been passed. Because a lot of the things he made reference to, a lot of the emergency provisions for the well-being of Nigerians that he made reference to in his presentation, we have actually addressed them in the House of Representatives, and we are only waiting for the Senate to concur and to help us make those things real for Nigerians. And I wish that the Senate had concurred before now, because already some of the mischiefs we were trying to cure, or some of the ills we were trying to prevent, have already started to occur because precisely because this bill has not become law. Specifically, the bill, the Emergency Economic Stimulus Bill, it deferred payment of mortgages. It removed import duty on all medicines and medical goods, so that to make it easier for the NCDC or for the state governments or whoever else to be able to access the medical equipment that they require that we cannot manufacture in Nigeria here or are not readily available in Nigeria here. In addition to that, we essentially gave up to a 50% rebate on taxes, on income taxes for companies, so long as those companies maintain their staff strength between 31st of March till from the 1st of March to the 31st of December. The idea is, if you maintain your staff strength as it is, you essentially get a tax refund that allows you to be able to continue your operations even though it's minimized or whatever. So we have already taken action in that regard as it relates to addressing some of the present needs of Nigerians, and we will still take further action as the need arises and within the powers of the House of Representatives.
Well, thank you very much, Dibem.
Then also finally, I wanted to speak to Professor Maurice Iwu's presentation. I was delighted by some of the comments he's made and some of the things he's spoken about. In fact, I did not know up until now that some of those advancements have already occurred, and I'm proud that he, being a Nigerian, and is part of integral to that process. However, I need Professor Iwu to please, when he is responding to some of the questions, highlight specific challenges that he believes can be addressed by legislative action. Yes, we are all part of the government, but the reality is there are certain things or certain improvements that cannot be made by the legislature. There are certain things that by law and by practice are firmly domiciled within the authority of the executive. What we have in the National Assembly is what I like to call the convening power. That is the power to convene people together and say, here is a problem, we must advance a solution before this is over. Another power we have, of course, is the power to pass legislation. So I would really appreciate it if the Professor Iwu can please highlight specific areas where he believes legislative intervention will serve the purpose of either facilitating these advancements in medical technology or improving the circumstances that will allow him to do what he needs to do for us and for the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dibem, for that wonderful presentation. Before we go on to taking questions, and with many of us are in WhatsApp groups, many of us have been seen on social media where people share this information that the bill, the proposed bill is going to be a mandatory vaccine. Actually, that is the crux of the matter. A lot of grammar has been spoken here. For the man on the street, I want you, Dibem, to address the man on the street. Is this bill with the intention to force people for mandatory vaccine that is yet to be found? And has this bill got anything to do with Bill Gates? Sorry, I have to ask that question. This is for the street and for the WhatsApp groups.
We have no intention of passing laws in Nigeria on the basis of the expectations of Bill Gates or any other individual from wherever they may present themselves. We have not consulted Bill Gates in formulating this legislation or in considering some of the provisions that we have considered as part of our efforts. I speak for myself, and I also speak for my boss in this regard. And I can assure you 100% that Bill Gates has no involvement in this particular legislation. Now, speaking to the issue of vaccination, Section 30 deals with vaccination in the first instance, and it deals with vaccination for international travelers. Again, I started by saying that there is nothing in this act in this proposed bill that is alien. Section 30, in fact, let me find Section 30 and perhaps we can all see what the bill specifically addresses. Section 30, subsection 1, every person on an international voyage, whether leaving or arriving in Nigeria, shall have undergone vaccination or other prophylaxis against all or any of the diseases as may be prescribed. Some of us on this program today have had to obtain yellow cards over the course of your lifetime for the purposes of traveling from one country to another. Countries have a right, and they have acted consistently on the right to say, if you are coming into Nigeria, or if you are coming to the United States, or you're coming to the United Kingdom, you must be vaccinated against so diseases. The yellow card that we obtain is actually called the International Certificate for Vaccination and Prophylaxis. That's what it is. These things are things that already exist and which we already adhere to as a matter of course. You cannot enter the United Kingdom today if you have not met certain vaccine provisions. You cannot travel to the US or to any number of countries if you cannot show that you have been vaccinated. You have been vaccinated against certain diseases. This is an existing framework that already exists in the country. We have just seen in our country and in the rest of the world, which we have simply adapted into this legislation. Now, Section 47 deals specifically with vaccinations in the time of infectious diseases, right? So if there is an outbreak of infectious diseases and a vaccine exists, that is, it has been subjected to trial, it has been approved by our country, it has been approved internationally, that vaccination, this law allows the DG to mandate that, you know what, we Nigerians have to be receive this vaccination, or people who are at risk of infection need to receive this vaccination. Again, this is not new under Nigeria's law. Section 13, subsection 4 of the Child's Rights Act, which was passed in 2003 as a federal law and has been domesticated in about 26 states, makes immunization and vaccination compulsory for children. Section 13, subsection 4, it mandates a guardian of a child to make sure that their children or the people people under their care are vaccinated against certain diseases. And that same act, in Section 13, subsection 5, makes it illegal. That is, it prescribes punishments for parents who refuse to vaccinate their children and all of that. And in Section 13, subsection 6, grants the courts the power to actually instruct or mandate that your child be immunized. So if you refuse for whatever reasons, the court can intervene and say, we're taking this child to go and receive vaccination and receive immunization as the need may arise. There is something I need us to note. When it comes to the issue of public health, public safety, and public defense, individual rights must succumb to the greater good. Last week, I was having a conversation with somebody, and he brought up an analogy that has stuck in my mind for a very long time. And I think I will repeat that analogy here. When you think about public health, think about it in this regard. Any one of us here can decide to go to a bar or to a public or sit in your house and drink alcohol. That's what I mean. And drink to your heart's content. You can drink 1 bottle, you can drink 2 bottles, you can drink 3 bottles. It may not be good for your health, but the government is not going to intervene and say, stop drinking alcohol in your house, or don't drink more than 2 bottles, or don't drink more than 3 bottles, because that is your personal right. But the moment you finish drinking and you get into a vehicle to operate a vehicle, at that point, the government has the authority to intervene, because your personal decision has now become a matter of public concern. Your personal decision now has public health and public safety consequences. At that point, the government can and should intervene in stopping you from taking that decision, or in compelling you to take another particular decision. Again, I need to reemphasize, nothing we have done with this bill is outside the remit of Nigeria's law as it currently exists. The government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, in Section 45 of the Constitution, has the express authority to take action that may abrogate certain personal rights, where doing so is necessary for the public, for the protection of public health, for national security, for national defense, and for public safety purposes. This is the reality within which we already exist, and we have simply sought to build on it. Second thing I want to reemphasize before I leave is this bill is this document is a bill, and it is a proposal, and it still has a long way to go before it becomes an act of parliament and before it is signed by the president, if the president chooses to sign it. During that process, a lot of improvements will be made. A lot of things will be added, a lot of things will be removed, a lot of things will change, and the bill will be perfected. Because mind you, for this bill to pass in the House and to pass in the Senate, you need a majority of the votes in the House and a majority of the votes in the Senate. To achieve that majority in the House and in the Senate, you must make sure that the bill is acceptable to a significant swath of Nigeria's population, who are represented by their members in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. Every tribe in Nigeria, every religious concern in Nigeria is represented in the House of Representatives, and all of those people will have an opportunity to do what we call clause by clause consideration of this particular legislation before it becomes the law of the land. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dubem. I think while you were speaking, and I can see that Daniel Bwala has something and a lot on his mind to engage on the submissions you've made. Bwala, you have the floor.
Okay. Actually, the bill, quite frankly, needs a lot of work. And then if I have to maybe clarify a number of issues, beginning with one that relates to arrest. And then my friend cited the Administration of Criminal Justice Act, where it says, if the police officer forms the opinion that you're about to commit a crime, he can arrest you without warrant. So if that is what we're using as a yardstick, then the direct translation would mean that if a police officer forms the opinion that you're about to contract a disease, then he has power to arrest you. You can see that that is not realistic, that is not applicable. And then secondly, the policeman who will arrest, if he wants to arrest someone because the person has COVID-19 and wants to spread it to others, is the policeman health officer. And secondly, how do you determine whether or not the arrest is legal and lawful? Is the court, the power of the court to determine that is not there? Then of course, while quite a number are drawn from the Constitution and extant laws, 90% of the provisions of the bill are direct copy from Singapore. While it is not a bad idea to copy something if it is good, the only sad thing is that most of the provisions in that Singapore bill, which we copied, are even subject of conversation in Singapore at the moment that they are seeking to repeal and replace that. So we cannot look at the future by looking backward. It needs a wholesale change. Then, of course, finally, with respect to the bill and then the impression that people are having, like I said, and it bears repeating, we can't kill it. We have to make it work. But then if we have to make it work, we have to look at it, balkanize it where necessary, and make sure that we tailor the law to be consistent with what is happening here. The bill was poorly drafted. I must be very honest. I just try to be honest, but we can make it better. Thank you.
And quickly, Dubem, can you just, I see you raised your hand, so can you just quickly respond to that? Just 1 minute before we get...
My senior colleague...
just 1 minute, please, Chief Dubem, just 1 minute.
My senior colleague is wrong on the law and he's wrong on the facts. There is no section of this bill that abrogates the right of the court or the right of an individual to go to the court to seek an interpretation of the act or to challenge provisions of the act. You cannot do that. You cannot pass a bill that says a Nigerian cannot go to court to challenge. On what basis do you do that? If you insert such a language in a bill, it will fail when it gets to when it is challenged by the courts. But even more directly, in this particular bill that is being considered, it is made clear there that when a person is arrested on suspicion of having committed an offense under this act, that person must be brought before a magistrate court. So the jurisdiction of the court is not implied in this bill. It is expressed in this bill, and I believe that if my distinguished senior colleague were to take a bit more time to consider the provisions of this bill, he will reach the same conclusion.
I read it through and through.
Now, as it regards the issue of arrest without warrant, Administration of Criminal Justice Act, Section 52, notwithstanding the provisions of this act or any other law relating to arrest, a police officer, upon reasonable suspicion of a design to commit an offense, may arrest without orders from a magistrate and
what is the test of reasonability?
Where it appears to the officer that the commission of the offense cannot be otherwise prevented. The offenses that are included in the act, where the DG can order an arrest and an arrest has to be effected, are very clear. For example, if you have been instructed to remain in an isolation center and you run away from the isolation center, you can be arrested and charged. If you have been tested and you know that you have been tested and you have been found to be a carrier of an infectious disease, and you take other action like getting on a public transport or going to a public place without taking necessary precautions or without seeking permission, you can be arrested. These are the provisions. So the police officer does not need to know your health status. The police officer merely needs to know that you are in violation of a specific order that has been issued under the act. And if you live in an isolation area, and the funny thing is, some of these things that we are talking about now are already being implemented by the government as we speak now. For example, there was a lockdown order in Lagos and Ogun State and in the FCT for a number of weeks. If you step outside of your house in violation of that lockdown order, a police officer who accosts you can arrest you at that point in time for violating the order. Whether you are carrying COVID-19 or you are not carrying COVID-19 is irrelevant to the question of whether you can be arrested at that particular point in time because you are in violation of an order that has been given. It is the same principles that exist under the Act.
Please, let's allow, thank you very much. If we allow the two barristers to continue this way, it will take all our time. So let's allow Professor Maurice to take the questions from the public.
No, I think, sorry, before Professor Maurice takes the floor again, I think Professor Joseph Itegeme is here. And Professor, if you're able to just quickly, it's quite unfortunate that we have issues with the time. The time was not properly communicated as you told me. Can we please have you quickly, even if it means 3 minutes, just to, make your input? Professor, if you can hear me. I can see you're in. Can you, I can't see any audio. If you can hear me, can you make your input right away? Hello, Professor. Okay, so on that note, I think Professor Joseph is having some issues with his device, maybe. So probably we might have time to still listen to him. Now, we will be taking questions. So those questions, Professor Iwu, I know there are questions that were specifically, before we take more questions, there are some questions that were specifically during the submissions directed to you. Can you please take them before we take more from the audience?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Prof.
First of all, I just want to address one issue that was mentioned, and then also you also spoke to that. That is the issue of the testing. Why our testing numbers are not as large as that of some other countries is the method we are using. The PCR sequencing method that the NCDC is using happen to be the more sensitive method, and I think it's like the gold standard that they're adopting. And I'm sure that if the number of tested cases against those who are positive, if they are closed, then they may change into the more rapid testing method. Right now, 22,492 they have as of yesterday, and only 3.5 positive out of the total number that are tested. I think they are pretty comfortable that what they're doing is the right thing. And I think their own emphasis is more on curing, just by the side. Then the other questions actually came in two sets of questions. One by the honorable member, where he asked clearly what is it that is stopping us from moving forward. I just want to say that there are two issues here. There is a product or two products, but there was also an information. The information is the one that has been let out of the bag, and it's not Professor Iwu alone who can actually utilize that information. It's a data that we are giving out there. So that what is preventing is just that, as I said, that particular will to be able to move. In practical terms, we could have done what we did during the Ebola, namely we could have sought funds and do it on our own. But we still haven't gotten out of the problem that came out during that Ebola period. We had a product, we had a laboratory that was built during that process. But the things that came with it in 2015 is still lingering. But I don't want to go into the details of that. But the issue here is that the patients are not ours. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a physician. My job is to develop products and then hand them over to be tested. I had mentioned earlier. And then the much more important, perhaps low-hanging fruit problem there is the whole issue of support. There is no willingness to even test them and to see whether they are working or not. We have been able to show by scientific method what we have done. As I said, a product that has been tested by clinical trial 33 times, and out of a total of that 7,145 patients, we are giving information here which can be utilized by anybody. Then there was also the question by Honorable Dubem, where he asked us what the legislative can do. This legislature itself can actually do an oversight. In period like this, I don't know why there had not been some kind of emergency hearing. We have a situation in our hands here, and nothing stops them, the various committees, nothing stops them from even holding hearing on these issues. And nothing stops them from actually asking the agencies concerned to be able to fast track the process. Instead, what I saw from the Ministry of Health, I thought that was laughable. Well, that there was something that floated in the web, where the ministry itself now sends a message to NAFDAC, asking NAFDAC to be able to register its own product that was concocted by the Ministry of Health. When the supervisory ministry now has an interest, then you can then see why they are not interested in the more rigorously researched process and then products. So that particular issue, there is the issue of the Nigerian factor, so to speak. I also don't want to buy the suggestion that it could be probably because I'm from Africa and all that. No. Nobody is stopping us. The West are not telling us not to do anything we want to do. The laws are ours. The product is ours. The government is ours. We're all part of it. If Professor Iwu, I'm not trying to be arrogant here. If with my reach and then contacts, I cannot make the government move. I cannot make people move. I wonder if somebody who is still in the university, a lesser person in terms of age and reach, but who is much more brilliant than myself, who has even things that are more potent. I wonder what chance he has to be able to advance such a thing beyond his lab. So those are the things that actually stopping it. Then, as I said, the critical thing here is that the government is have to show interest, or the people concerned. It's not issue of just money, because the private sector raised huge amount of money that we hear on TV. That can be deployed. And as I say, it doesn't have to come to Professor Maurice. It is an information there. There is an information component of it. There is a product part of that. The product, yes, is ours, but information is already out there. And I was also glad when I then seen a lot of people saying that we have cures for this, we have cure for that. For giving them that voice, the fact that I could say it and boldly defend it, that the people are now trying to be bold enough to say, yeah, they can try it. And perhaps one or two of them may be right. And so that is where we are. So in terms of practical things to happen, one is the government buy-in, two is the financing of the project, but third and much more importantly, the fact that we don't have patients of our own. So there has to be that government interest that they want to test this into their site. And once government shows interest, then every other thing will fall in place.
Okay, thank you very much.
Together.
Okay, so are you okay, Prof? Thank you very much.
Those three questions, yes.
Oh, okay.
And then the one from I think Dubem was the one that said that, or somebody that said about what legislature can do. I've also answered that, namely that they can have hearing, they can do their oversight function, and ask the agencies of government, why is this taking so long a time to happen? Why can't we do X, Y, Z? That is what their job is. The laws we have in this country are pretty good. It's not a question of having the laws, but actually enforcing them and making them work. And in times of emergency, like when we have a pandemic in our hands, I think that is where the legislature can come in and then hold people accountable for what they have been hired to do, and ask them, you normally do this in 1 month, do it in less time. NAFDAC yesterday now told us that they can do some of the reviews that took months or weeks, that they can do them in 2 weeks. Those are the kind of things that the legislature can make it actually happen.
So thank you very much, Professor. We will take more questions, but before I do, Prof, your summation is somewhat heartbreaking, I must note, because it means that as a nation, it appears we do not believe in ourselves and the capacity that we have. Because here we are, you of your status, someone of national assets, basically jumping from pillar to post for people to listen and take action, and it's not happening. Then one wonders if that is someone else, what is going to happen? It's really sad because we don't believe in ourselves. In Senegal, a small nation that is able to actually develop a testing kit that is about $1. And we've seen things that they have done. Here we are in Nigeria, the so-called giant of Africa, which some people fondly would say, giant of Africa, probably working on a mosquito limb, yet is not able to take the African nation to the next level. On this note, I will invite my sister, Ankyo Briggs. Ankyo, you are removed your mute. If you can ask your question now, that would be appreciated.
Okay. One question for Professor Iwu. I saw him on television, I think around February or thereabout. Prof, I'm not too sure, but I think I was very intense when you came on channels. And I was horrified, even at that time, to note that you have this information. And we find ourselves at that time where it seemed to me, listening to you, that nobody was paying attention. And that seems to be what you're saying now again. The question I want to ask, therefore, is that since this is not your what you're doing, I don't understand it as a government thing, because if it's government, you wouldn't have this problem. So I'm assuming that it's private. Now, if it is, can't you approach pharmaceutical companies outside of Nigeria that will bring in, that will provide the investment and even the environment in which you can actually work, and let's see if these things are going to be viable in Nigeria, and then or viable to as a vaccine or as a cure for the whole world. It's not only for Nigeria. And then very quickly, the other one is on the issue of the proposed bill. As a human rights activist, I want to stress here that the bill itself, this is not the first time that Nigeria is being faced with vaccination issues. When we had a time when polio, if we remember very well, some years ago, when some section of Nigeria actually refused to take the polio vaccine injections because they believed all sorts of things about the polio. And I wondered why the issue of this bill did not arise then, but maybe it is better late than never. And so the process that the bill is taken is not very it is horrifying for people like us when the law is going to take such drastic measures for a vaccine that has not yet even been developed. So to put Nigerians under such pressure with this vaccine bill, for me, is a distraction. I think the most important thing for us to be able to achieve is to assure Nigerians by going through with the process of finding a cure and concentrating on what our scientists, people like Professor Iwu, can come up with. That should be the key, and not something that even America, the United Kingdom, the WHO has not even found a cure. Nigeria is not participating. And then we now have a situation where a system that we don't trust, where I'm amongst the Nigerians, and we're many that do not trust our lawmakers, that they have our interests at heart. My brother was talking about that it has to go through the parliament or the National Assembly, and that it will be by vote. We all know what that means. We have a situation where if you go to the National Assembly, some section of Nigeria, like the northern part, has more representation in the National Assembly than the southern part. So if you now take this sort of bill and a particular section does not want it and is in their favor, then it won't go through. So for me, that doesn't fly. What should fly is what are we going to do as a nation to make sure that whatever Professor Iwu has and have had for years, how do we push it forward, both within Africa, within Nigeria, and internationally, so that we quickly see whether what Professor Iwu has is going to be useful to the world and to Nigeria or not.
Thank you very much, Ankyo. And Professor, can you quickly respond to that? And while you're doing that, Uche Nanzekwe, please get ready you to ask your question after Prof responds. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, you're actually correct. It was in February that I did approach the two ministers, and then what you said is right. About the private sector aspect of it, I belong to the private sector. As I said, we have Nime Pharmaceuticals, and ultimately we will be able to get there. The issue here is time, and that people are dying. Then before I came back to the country for a while, for 10 years, I was at U.S. Army Institute of Research, Walter Reed Army Institute of Research. So with just a wink, people will be able to do the study. I have no doubt about that. The product will ultimately make it. I have no doubt whatsoever. It's just like today. But there's something like ownership. I could have really pleased me to know, and if my country was the one that said was part of the solution. Ultimately, it is just almost like the Artemisia that we use now for malaria. It was essentially a Chinese plant, but the Americans are the one that did the wonders in it, and it became an international drug, which we are all enjoying. The same thing is happening here. The lead compound, one of them is actually an Asian plant, but we provided the data, the information. Data now is money. That is the currency of the world as we. So we are actually the one that provided data that say, yeah, this thing can be used for this purpose. And for me, really, that is the bigger information that we are provided to the world coming from Nigeria. In terms of the private sector, as I did say, that we can quite easily do that on our own, but it will take longer time, and we are doing that. Nimet will eventually have andrographolide in the marketplace. But luckily, we do have the detox tea, the IHP detox tea, which is currently being sold. So there are no problem about that whatsoever. But ultimately, you still need that clinical trial. But if we cannot do it, others can do it. We have published the data. So it is no longer it is a secret. So people will be able to do it. And emergency law, WHO laws, even the TRIPS Act, the laws allow nations to even bypass patents if there is a pandemic like this. So people are definitely going to try them out on their own. I have no doubt about that.
Thank you very much. So Uchenna Nzekwe, you have the floor to ask your question.
Okay, thank you for having me. My question is to Professor Iwu and also to Dubem. There is something which we have not actually addressed during this discourse, and that is the big elephant in the room, which is funding. Current analysis by the World Bank clearly shows that the Nigerian economy and the African economy is going to contract by more than 6% by the end of this year. And we're here discussing about vaccination. We are not talking about testing, and vaccination costs money. My point is this: those who are proposing this bill, what attention have you paid towards testing the vast majority of your population? And we are aware that the current testing is nothing to write home about. And also to Professor Iwu, I did appreciate there was a comment which you made, which is the idea of Nigerians, using local solutions to address international problems. Someone has actually raised that issue and asked you that question. Perhaps you might be able to go back to it and give us a much more flesh in the bone of your answer, which is, why is it that all your recommendations, all the expertise and skills you and everybody concerned with this has brought to play since this pandemic, why is it being ignored or not paid the attention it deserves from the federal government?
Thank you very much, Uchenna. Professor, over to you.
Yes, on the first question about testing, although it wasn't directly to me, but I think states are solving that. In the two states that I'm actively involved in, that is namely Imo, Anambra, and then to some extent Rivers State. Now there is a testing laboratory privately built by somebody here in Imo State. It's called Everest Laboratory. So they will start their own testing and so on. So the testing is very important, and they'll be going to happen. And when people just keep waiting until governments come to their aid, I think that's also a misplaced. So that takes me directly answer to the question you raised. I don't know why. Frankly, that is a question, that is what I found very curious and very, very difficult to understand. Because the information that I gave in February was nothing to do with a product. It was pure information that this virus is coming and this is what we have for it, and that this is public. That information aspect was just there for the taking. Why, I don't know. But people in government, they have more information than I do. There might be some bigger reasons why this is not so, but it's totally beyond me. I'm just a scientist, and I just do earn a living from pure science. But as I also said earlier, one thing is the government side, one thing is the private sector. The private sector will get there more efficiently, but slower. But when there is a pandemic like this, you expect that the emergency, the self-survival, the group survival instinct will be able to kick in. And there is a lot of very rich Nigerians who are rich enough to even fly it on their own. Why are they not doing that? Again, I don't have the answer. Because as I said, this information, they may even have their own private preferred pharmaceutical companies that can make it for them. The law allows them to even bust the pattern we have at this time because of the pandemic. The law allows it. And then they can actually make their own product and then have it. But let us at least save lives, test the products and test the concept. I don't know why, frankly, I don't. If I say I have the answer, I'll be lying.
So, Prof,
okay, do you have any?
Prof, I know I would get some other questions in. Just like what you've just said now regarding the private sector, we know that companies in the US and I think the German companies, when they announced the hint that there was possible light at the end of the tunnel, we saw their share prices skyrocket. So, Now, the question is it that the private sector in Nigeria, because this is a gold mine, is it that the private sector does not have the data, the information to make an informed decision to invest in order to reap from this? Because from the way the world is running from pillar to post, this is the next gold, joined together with oil. It's the mine. So what's happening? Why can't the private sector basically, do the thing?
As I said, I belong to the private sector. We have access to, again, commercial money that you borrow, but in America and places you mentioned, they have venture capital, which is a whole different people who are prepared to take risks. But here, when people make money in a soft sense, they don't really like taking that kind of risk. So the private sector here, I'm as baffled as any other person. Again, remove the product from the information here. The product, you can discard our own product, but information we have can also be utilized by anybody. That is the dilemma I have here, because I don't frankly have the answer. But that's why I'm also participating to let the world know that there is information. But with time, I expect that Americans, we have had one or two contacts and we are still trying to say, let us do it here first. With time, they will be able to do that. And I'll be very, very willing to let it go and say, yes, go ahead, test it and do whatever you can. Because it's not a difficult to make.
That will be the greatest tragedy that will befall the African nation if we will all sit down here and allow the Americans across the continent to just come and grab it. Anyway, the next person on the line is Jide Lanrehin. Can you please make your observation or question? Jide? I've removed your mute, Jide.
You haven't.
Jide, go ahead. Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, thank you very much. Just very briefly, I just wanted to give a very brief account of what is going on in the United Kingdom. As my senior colleague, Daniel Bwala said, the situation in the UK is somewhat, has been confused by social media. In fact, there is no law or powers to forcefully vaccinate anyone in the United Kingdom. What there is the power relating to screening and assessment. And what that means is the public health officers, or constable, a police officer, or an immigration officer can detain an individual for the purposes of assessment, and that person would be committing a criminal offense if they escape or fail to provide information in relation to their health status, particularly if they're coming from some territory in the world where there's been difficulties in terms of the coronavirus. So, although it's been said widely that there's the power is specifically for vaccination, that isn't the case. But of course, if somebody is detained to be assessed and they're found to be infectious and they're asked to self-isolate, then they have to comply. Otherwise, they may find themselves committing a criminal offense. I'm not suggesting for one moment that there are no difficulties with interfering with somebody's civil liberties or rights when it comes to the obstruction of their movement or free movement. But there is no such thing that you can forcefully vaccinate people. The more reason why I am very concerned about the bill, and the gentleman who spoke on behalf of the speaker, the gentleman who spoke for the Speaker of the National Assembly said quite properly that it's a bill, it's not law yet. But what he must understand is that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in relation to that bill. And it's not just the fact that we do not know around the world the full extent of this virus. There is no, the medical people are still seeking to find out what this virus is about, what treatment best to deploy, and what vaccination should be deployed. So therefore, to then be in a position where you are now going to make it mandatory to force people to be vaccinated when we're still got vaccinations takes years before you get to the point where you can say that a vaccination has been tested, properly tested, and fit to be used for humans. We're in a rush at the moment to get there, and quite rightly so. And I commend the works of the great Professor Iwu himself and others in the scientific fields who are doing a great job trying to make sure that we find the proper treatment. But we have not got to the point where you can force people and make it mandatory to start injecting them with vaccinations which are yet to be tested. And that is why putting people in isolation, assessing them, confirming that they're infectious, and so on and so forth. Of course, I'm not suggesting that that's going to be easy or that it doesn't require drastic efforts to do that. That of course has to be done. But what we shouldn't be doing, and the gentleman spoke very, very articulate the way he expressed himself on behalf of the speaker. But we cannot get to this point where we're vaccinating people by force of law, when we do not know. We're still trying to test. I also agree with him, so that it's not just condemning everything that he said, or because he's actually put forward very good arguments. It doesn't really matter where the law is picked from. It doesn't matter. The Nigerian constitution itself was not indigenous to Nigeria. Of course, it was indigenized in the sense that things were added onto it, but we know where the constitution itself, the 1999 constitution itself, came from. So the fact that it's come from anywhere, or the basis of it comes from somewhere else, that's not the problem. What we now do with it is the problem. If we take something from somewhere else, which is mandatory to vaccinate people, where we do not know what these vaccinations, the final product is likely to be, and in haste, we go out and say, we've got to vaccinate people, and the police officer can arrest people or soldiers. And we know in the Nigerian context, once we start getting into this situation where the law, the authorities have the backing of the law to mandate vaccinations, then it could be really, really, it could be a fatal position to be in. So my concerns is let us take our time to make sure that the bill is properly scrutinized. There's nothing to rush into. It needs to be properly scrutinized. There are panels all over the place who can assist in making sure that the bill, when it becomes law, is a proper law that is befitting for a country as Nigeria. We shouldn't be using Nigeria as a dumping ground where we pick this law from Singapore, or we pick it from Malaysia, which is becoming a trend at the moment, where people are just going out and picking things up and then just imposing it on us. So we need to work. And he's a very, very articulate and capable man, and I like the way he's presented himself. But those are my points. Thank you very much for allowing me.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to use the opportunity to bring Professor Joseph Itheteme, please. It's very unfortunate that there were some technical issues. Prof, if you're still there, can you please 3 to 5 minutes make your presentation, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mazi. It's okay. This is Joseph Itheteme. I'm in Atlanta. I am making a comment as a Nigerian-born scientist, but in the United States, I'm not representing CDC in this comment. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, I am making a comment as a Nigerian-born scientist. I live in the United States. I'm interested in Nigeria first, and I'm happy, a proud Nigerian, of course. Two comments I would like to make. Number one is we're in a global community where you assume that maybe our society may know more or may be more aware of how to address key issues about the country. I was reading through the bill, one of the bills, and it appears that it was reading to me, maybe because I'm not a political scientist or an attorney, it appears as if it was reading that Nigeria had the authority to quarantine even within and outside the country. I'm not sure whether that is true, but somebody can explain that to me. Number two part that I'm very interested in is directed to Professor Iwu and a few others in the biomedical areas like me. I do biomedical science, and sometimes when people come across as maybe proposing a cure, a wonder drug type of one cure for everything, I get nervous. I don't think it is in this modern time that you approach disease in that manner, that one product will cure everything that is incident to humanity. It is not a good start in most cases. And of course, modern medical approaches will not be too kind, will not be too welcoming in when medicine is approached in that manner. The second aspect of this comment relates to how we come across with our products. Oh, it's very good. I was very happy to hear that Nigeria may have an approach to this pandemic. If people wanted to parade their product as herbalist, my village at home is called Agenebode. If they want to sell their product there and restrict it to that environment and see whether people are cured or not, it is fine. After all, when you get into the bus in Lagos, you see a lot of people peddling all sorts of things. Even in the United States, people used to peddle cocaine in bottles and gin and everything. However, when you want to go public, orthodox, international, you have to be ready to ensure that your products meet international standards. I do not think India will officially, or Nigeria will officially allow any Indian concoction to be produced and sent to Nigeria without FDA, NAFDAC approval, without some basic global best practice approach to certification. So when we come across, when we develop some of these personal products, let's ask ourselves, how do we want to play on the international scene or in a local setting? If we want to restrict what we are doing to our environment, we want them to be restricted to that place, fine. You can do your thing, and if you can make money out of it, it's great. But once you want to go into the international market, you cannot be asking the Nigerian government to just approve you for the local environment when you have a product that may have implications for a place like Brazil, the United States, the UK, and everywhere. So you have to ensure that you take steps to ensure that your product is well, is transparent, your product information is transparent, that your claims are verifiable, they are reproducible anywhere. You can retain your patent. Nobody says it's going to take that money from you. You can have your patent everywhere in the world. So those are the three things I wanted to mention. Number one, how Nigeria plans to quarantine people outside of the country, because that was what I thought I was reading. Number two, if we have local initiative with respect to food or products and the rest, how we want to advertise it. How we want to go to the public with it. Whether we want to restrict it to our environment and let it be there, and if people verify it and we can sell it, it's fine. Or we want to go international, in which case we have to be ready to play by the international standards. You saw how even Fauci did not just allow the president of the United States to just throw chloroquine into the to the public. He had to stand his ground because science didn't direct him otherwise. Thank you all for listening to me. I appreciate you, Mazi Ezeoke, for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Professor. Now, the question is directed to two people. One is to Dubem and the other is to Professor Iwu. So I will first give Dubem the opportunity to make clarifications based on what has been said. Then after that, Professor Iwu will make a clarification as well. Dubem, over to you. Dubem, are you still there?
If Dubem is not in, we have another honorable member of the House of Representatives in our midst.
Dubem is here. Dubem is here.
Okay, Dubem, go ahead. Please, Dubem, make it short. Please, do not exceed 1 minute, please.
Okay, all right. First thing is, there seems to be a misconception that the vaccine provisions in this bill are targeted only to the present coronavirus crisis. That is not the case. Unfortunately, Nigeria is almost like an epidemic hotspot. In the last 10 years, we have had to deal with epidemics or disease outbreaks, including the Lassa fever and any number of those, some of which are still ongoing at the moment and killing people. So the vaccine provisions or the provisions of the bill generally are not intended specifically or only for the government's ability to respond to the current coronavirus pandemic. We are trying to build a framework to manage infectious diseases, generally speaking. It's not only the coronavirus or whatever. Of course, at this particular point in time, in the bill itself, it makes it clear. There's a section that deals with how these vaccines can be applied. Vaccines can only be applied after they have been developed, tested, approved, and all of those things. And again, they can only be delivered by medical professionals acting within medical health guidelines. So I need to address that misconception that perhaps this is we're putting a vaccine position so that we can give people vaccines for COVID-19. As far as I'm aware, no such vaccine currently exists, and it may take a while before such a vaccine becomes available. However, when that time does come, I believe that it is in the best interest of our country for us to have an existing framework that allows us to reach as many people as possible and to prevent people from falling sick and dying unnecessarily.
Okay, thank you very much.
Now, also, I need to address some of issues raised by my most distinguished senior colleague, Jide Lalane. Now, with regards to the English law, I'm not an expert on what the English provisions say, but I know that there have been cases in the English court, one case in 2013 and in 2017, another in 2017. In the 2013 matter in the High Court, it was a test case actually, and the court ruled that two sisters aged 11 and 15 should be given the MMR vaccine, even though they themselves and their mother did not want them to have it. So even though there might not be express provisions in UK law that mandate vaccinations or compulsory vaccinations, in practice, that has actually been what has happened on a number of occasions. In 2017, there was another case. I will get the proper references for these cases and send them subsequently. In 2017, there was a case also in the High Court where a lady who was a vegan, if I remember correctly, did not want her children to be to receive vaccinations because she said she wanted them to live what she called a toxin-free life. The court ruled against her and mandated that those children should actually be vaccinated. it goes back to the point I was making before about public health considerations and the ways in which public health considerations often make for certain government actions that may ordinarily be considered to be in violation of particular personal rights and for other particular circumstances. Now, finally, because I have to go, I have a pre-scheduled engagement for 10 p.m. and I have to leave. I needed to crave the indulgence of Professor Maurice Iwu. If it is okay by him, I would like to get his contact details from the organizers of this program so that we can engage more subsequently and try to find ways the government, particularly the National Assembly, can act to help us achieve some of the objectives that we need to achieve as it regards public health in the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Maurice, 1 second, please. If we will have Honorable Akani to give us another insight on the thinking of the House of Representatives on some of the issues that have been raised here. He is a high-ranking member of the House of Reps. So, Honorable Akani, if we can have, please, your perspective on some of the issues that have been raised here.
You mean Akani Delako?
Yes, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, so some of the issues raised I think most have been cleared by Dubem, but the least part of the remaining is that right now, like everybody has said, it's just in the formative act. It's just a formative act. It's a bill that is just being crafted. And by the time, as you are aware, there's another bill that is coming in at the Senate right now. Both still have to be consolidated. And they still have to go through public hearing. For instance, when we are talking about the legislative steps that are supposed to be taken, the bill had only passed second reading. And the one for the Senate has not even gotten to second reading at all. So there's still a lot of work to be done. Now, all these things that people are saying and all these fears that people are having about conspiracy theories and something like that, some of them are well-founded, some of them are just conspiracy theories and things like that. But as the time comes, before the bill even gets to public hearing, a lot of work must have been done about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Professor Maurice, you will now have the floor to address the issues raised. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I think the professor came late, so he didn't hear what I said because we are not playing in the local scene at all. But he's strong in the sense of about modern technology. We are no longer dealing with so-called precision medicine. Those days are gone. What we now do is what we call network pharmacology, namely that we are not trying to say that we will try to maximize the molecular product that you have. The chloroquine that is being utilized now for COVID-19 is a known anti-malaria drug. Multiple use as much as possible is encouraged in pharmacy now rather than before. So he's strong in that premise, because if that's the argument he was making, right now, why we are now looking into phytomedicines more and more is because of this issue of network pharmacology, whereby we have products that have no single one as active as the other. Then the other issue is that he also mentioned, we are playing in the big league. Yes, we are in Nigeria, but there's no single paper that were published that have not been in the foremost journals in our area. Let him Google the product. One of them asked on him, if you search the compound, the putative action that is linked to that compound was the work we did on it on its antipsychotic property. It didn't have to be done by us. As I said, what we are dealing here with 3 different issues. We have a phytomedicine, I agreed, which I said is IHP detox tea. That one is separate. We're also trying to develop the product as a Nigerian drug, which my own company, by the way, Nimet was what used to be Pfizer. We bought over Pfizer in 1997 by Nigerians, and when I say we, Nigerians, then it was converted to Nimet. So Nimet is a former pharmaceutical company. So it's not as if we are trying to conquer something by the side. The thirdly, that I made a point here that I wanted it to be that Nigeria is participating in a global solution. And nobody, for 1 minute, I also made that point that we didn't want any corners to be cut. We said that we want to do everything kosher the proper way, but let it be speeded up. And that was the issue. As I said, if he had listened, I'm sure if Professor had listened when I made my presentation, he would have known that I went through the gamut of how the processes this took place. The fact that a product is an antiviral agent, just like an antibiotic, if it's an antiviral agent, you can also see that all the products that are trying, including the very last one that America actually announced, was a drug that was used earlier for Ebola virus. They are antiviral. And the important thing that what I was trying to explain, that the fact that it was active against Ebola, active against dengue fever, active against a virus, so that the cost of developing the product is not wasted on just one single entity. That compound is a molecule that's understood. And then finally, if you can check, the compound is called andrographolide. You will know that it is well studied, not only by us, but by people from all over. The other compound, the one from Garcinia cola, which we had done earlier, the people who did most of the work after we announced it in 1985 had been people from University of Ibadan. So it is like, as I said, science is like playing tennis. You lob the ball and people play it back to you, and it goes up and down like that. What is our miss here is that we have not moved it forward from product and information to something that will help save lives. So there is nothing lost here from our own point of view. We are playing it in the both local and the international. There's no law that says you cannot play international from a local premise.
Thank you very much, Prof. So, Obiosuji, you have the floor. Just make it very snappy. We are rounding up now, people.
No, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can all hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, please. I just have a question for Professor Iwu. I mean, insightful presentation. But I'm quite curious about the nature of this virus. Recently, we read that there are about 3 strains. I read that in the US or so, the dominant strain is the B strain, and in Wuhan, you have the A strain. Somewhere in Africa. So the question specifically is this, your products, is it that robust to take into the ability of this virus to mutate? So that if for any reason we have people who come in tomorrow with some kind of strange strain of the same virus, is this product able to take into consideration, you know, the nature of the mutation of the virus? And unfortunately, I don't know if Dubem has left. One question I would have loved to put to him is this: shouldn't we be concerned about the timing of this bill? Now, for the first time, Nigeria is dealing with a pandemic of this nature. I believe there's so much there for us to learn. I would have thought that the right thing to do would be to wait out this pandemic, take in as much notes as you want, learn as much as possible, and then you come out with a more robust proposal for a bill, rather than what seems to be ad hoc in nature. I think we should just take take it into consideration. Hopefully, Dubem will reply to that.
It's okay, thank you. Dubem is no more here. Dubem is locked off. He's got a different meeting. So, Prof, you can take that question just briefly.
Briefly, that's what part of what we want to find out. I think actually there are more than 3 various types of the virus. Once they pass through a system, they mutate, just like common flu virus. Find that the same flu you had, just coming from you to another person, may change and become more distant. But luckily, we are still hoping that because about 79% of genome in coronavirus SARS is still in this particular virus, that they may have something in common that may make them equally vulnerable to being treated. But we don't know yet. That's part of what clinical trial will do for us.
Okay, so I will be bringing in Otumba, but before Otumba comes in, Prof, I have these things. Sorry, we have Otumba will be next, Prof. But this question, you know, there is this conversation with chloroquine.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not saying you should prescribe it for us and for the world watching us now, but you know, as a layman, I'm restrained to ask: does it work?
For this particular purpose, since I'm not part of the study, I'm also a layman like you.
Prof.
Okay, we have a
okay, so please, we have after Otumba, we take Adeolore. Please, Otumba, you're on now.
Thank you very much for giving me this second opportunity. I do appreciate. And I also want to thank all the contributors, the experts, and so on and so forth, be it in the area of law and medicine and so on. And also the few activists that can see their face, and I know them. Well, as we all agree, nothing can be done without politics. All what we've been talking about is politics. I mean, at the end of the day, there are three major arms, and we've been talking about the arms of law and so on and so forth. Now, my biggest concern is this. At the end of the day, what is in need for an ordinary Nigerian? Because from experience, 99% of what is going on in Nigeria now, in the area of politics, which invariably affect every other thing in Nigeria, is nothing to do, is completely disconnected from the ordinary people. The ordinary people have no bearing, have no connection. Most of the laws that are going to be either when they become laws or so on and so forth, most of them are going to have a hard impact on the ordinary people, ordinary Nigerians, ordinary people from Delta, from Jalingo, from Mushin, and so on and so forth. Because when you're talking of eventually going to force vaccination on people, and so on, it is going to be the ordinary people. A corrupt policeman will want to go into his premises and force him out to do certain things. No, you're not going to do that with people who are less than 4% of our society, who have all what it takes to break the law, to do whatever they like in the country. Don't you, everybody here, you'll agree with me that it's high time we should start thinking of moving Nigerian beyond where we are today. 60 years on, we had so many elections, we had so many governments, and so on and so forth. I think some of we should be ashamed, especially most of us who are in the leadership role, because we are not doing anything to support the ordinary people. I'm just an ordinary Nigerian in the streets, speaking the language of the people. I have no doubt in my mind that most of these efforts, because of structural defects, defect we have, we're not going to make much progress about all these kind of things. And I'm not surprised. The professor from America is talking, yeah, he's well equipped, he's well protected, he can get all what he wants. And I can now see if Professor Iwu, I'm sorry, I hope you're on, is having problems to get his professional education known to the world. Because sometimes most of what we planted in our country, the wuru way of doing business, especially in political something, is now affecting us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that closing remark. So I think the next person on the line is Adioye Adebo. Yeah. So now you have the floor, sir.
Good evening, everyone.
Yes.
I would have loved them to be around to answer this question since it was the one that raised the point. However, since we still have Honorable Akoni in the house, he probably would just help us throw some light on it. There is an issue on tax refund for companies, and we know that after this whole war-like crisis that we find ourselves, there's a need to resuscitate the economy. And he made mention of tax refund for companies who had kept their staff rent from the 1st of March to the 31st of March. How much of this information is out there for small and medium-scale enterprises who have actually employed one or two people? Then the second question would be also to Honorable Akoni. We have the National Orientation Agency, and we are struggling with getting information down there to masses on how virulent this coronavirus is, on even how to manage the whole situation. How is the House holding the National Orientation Agency accountable? This responsibility of theirs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we will take the last Oh, well, I think we have two more people are asking question here. So when we take that, then we'll let them then answer that. So the second to last person here is Clifford. Clifford, can you ask your question, please?
To find alternative source.
Sorry?
Assure him when
Clifford, we cannot hear you. You're too far away from your phone.
This can be done within 24 hours or within 48 hours. You get me? But for the man to have rest of mind, and for every other person to have rest of mind, you can take him 72 hours. But it can be done before then.
Remember, this one is dollar, and it's going to Canada, and Canada uses dollar as well. So the transaction should be more faster.
So, Clifford, go ahead. Sorry.
You said he wants to do my money. You said I may have need for $110,000 USD on Monday going to Canada. If this night time
is Clifford addressing the issues of this meeting?
I've muted him. I think the noise is actually coming from his own side. Maybe we can allow someone else to speak so we clear him.
Let's have a okay. If the honorable Akandi can address the questions raised by the last question we had.
Where is it?
As explained, just as explained earlier, the bill is about for companies who are employers of labor are given the tax relief, and the tax relief is there's a condition attached to it in that you will keep your workload and your work staff. So that's it. And also, like it was earlier said, the bill too, it's not yet passed into law because it still has to be assented to by the president before it becomes an act. So on that, now the National Orientation Agency is strictly an executive agency. It has nothing to do with control over their actions or what they do, except when we have interventions of oversight functions to query them or why they are not doing their duty. So what they are supposed to be doing. But right now, all oversight functions are on hold because of the coronavirus. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for that clarification, because a lot of people have also been asking this question. One of the major problems we have under this pandemic is lack of effective communication. So if the national agency, being an arm of the executive, we should be in charge of enlightenment, I think they should have taken a more prominent role to enlighten the population on what the government is doing with regards to some of these issues we are having. But thank you very much for attending this meeting, and others who have also given us, shed more light on some of the issues that our people are so concerned about. One of our panelists last week, in fact, said that the major issue we are having in today's pandemic is lack of effective communication. The government is not communicating with the people with what they are doing. And if, as you said now, the oversight function of the National Assembly has been suspended, it then means that there is no one holding executive institutions to account. It is in order to hold the executive to account that in the UK here, the parliament has to reconvene, because at some point people started getting worried when the death rate kept rising high and high, and people are still having the same complaints we are having in Nigeria. It's the same complaint we are having here. People not having PPE kits, health professionals not having PPE kits, health professionals also dying from the pandemic. So people started getting worried. And so the National Parliament has to reconvene to hold the executive to account. So please, sir, what I would suggest here, if it's possible, even though the oversight function is suspended at the moment, with the National Assembly, they are the representatives of the people. They are the voice of the people. People are asking, where is the government? We are talking of testing here. The only people who can order for more testing is the executive arm. We are talking of lack of PPE. The only people who can do it is the executive arm. We are talking of encouraging local production. The only people who can make that happen is the executive arm of government. But when we don't see the executive arm, the only people we can run to is the National Assembly. They are the representatives of the people. We are now in the midst of an emergency. People are dying, many more will die. Is it possible for the National Assembly to reaffirm that oversight function, to call these agencies to appear, hold them before you, sir, and ask them, what have you been doing? Call the NCDC, ask them, what have you been doing? Why are we not having more tests? Let the committees of the National Assembly who are responsible call these executive agencies, ask them, what are you doing? Because that is why we have elected you. That is your function. Is it possible to happen, please?
So who is that question directed to now?
Honorable Akane, please. Has he left?
No,
Okay.
he's still here.
Hello, can I go ahead?
Yes, go ahead, sir.
Hello, yes, thank you so much. Like in my first task force to the National Assembly last week to come and give us a briefing, questions were asked, and some of it was what I said about the release of dead bodies of COVID-19 victims. Now, we were on break and we had to reconvene just because of this national emergency. But the thing is that the agencies that we were supposed to summon were the agencies we were supposed to summon were, most of them are not even working because they've been compulsorily sent home, except probably the executive officer and probably one or two other officers. But the field officers had already been sent home. If you recollect very well, in the weeks past, the leadership of the National Assembly was inviting nearly every head of agencies from the executive to ask questions about these things we are talking about. The National Assembly has now reconvened, but due to this coronavirus, we sit only once a week and do some other works on other days. So the people we are supposed to summon are not even at work at present. So it is only the heads of the agencies that we can talk to, and in most cases, the field officers have still not resumed. Right now, even with the lockdown that is being relaxed, it's only a certain percentage of senior officers from level 14, probably directorship upwards, that are still on duty, and they come only on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So the National Assembly too is having some difficulties in assessing the real people who we need to summon. just because of this. But we are still trying our best to get everybody on board. And I think within a few days from now, where all those committees that are concerned, especially those for health and other issues, are working around the clock. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Honorable. I think.
Okay, please, if you don't, okay, is it a question?
Yes. No, it's not a question. I think a comment here. Thank you very much, Honorable. It is quite, I know, there are some constraints, but some of us do not feel that the issues are being addressed with the level of, seriousness that most deserve. Last week we had here Professor Chukuma Soludo, who argued forcefully that what we are actually experiencing now is a warlike situation. And he made allusion and the comparison to the time of 1967 to 1970, where Nigeria was at war with the Biafran, and that the Biafran had to look inward, harnessed, and took every available resource to execute and to survive. In this case, one thinks if there is lapses within the executive, there must be leadership. And we are all looking at that the legislators must rise to this occasion and to secure Nigerians. Daniel Olumba, over to you.
Please, just to call on Reverend Canon Ikem Ibodike, who has been here. I saw him raising his hand some time ago. So if we can call on the Reverend Canon Ikem Ibodike, head of...
Reverend Canon, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's just that the issue I was raising my hand for had actually been more like resolved. But let me still observe that I'm not quite happy that this is also going the way of Nigeria. Things that is taken serious all over the world are not taken serious here. Probably because people are not dying the way they die in America, or the usual laissez-faire attitude, which we experience in all sectors of Nigeria. The handlers of the nation and the polity don't take things very seriously. They would rather be spending from the public funds in taking care of their needs, do all their travels, do all their engagements with international communities and all that, when in actual sense, they're not there to render any service to the people. It is quite disheartening. I wanted to also say that you can't take it away from me that a kind of new colonialism in events where the Professor Iwu is more like begging to be assisted from the arms of from the settlement of the government to do what they got to do. Just sad, just very sad. And we're hoping that from all the comments of all the people who have participated in this discussion, that one way or the other, it wouldn't go as the way things are done here, that it would more like be a wake-up call. The young man who represented the Speaker of House of Representatives, we go back. I don't agree that they are doing enough. The legislative arm should be able to also bring the executive arm to do what they got to do. Lives are at stake. The nation is also at stake. A situation whereby they seek for public offices, and then when it gets to the point at which the services should be done, they will not be there. It's quite unfortunate. Let me end up by appreciating Professor Iwu for all he's been doing. He should not get tired. One day, Nigeria will get to where we dream to have Nigeria to be. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity, and God bless you all.
Thank you very much. On that note, if no other person, I would be, on that note, I will be saying,
Professor Joseph, you saw Professor Joseph waving his hand. If I can make, if I may just say, Professor Joseph, just a few minutes, 1 minute, and then give our speakers 30 seconds to give us a rounding up speech, so to say, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Yeah. All right. Professor Joseph is raising up his hand.
I want to make a contribution, please.
In this day and age, the mechanism of action of any product you have is fundamental to its recognition. I understand that Agbo can work. I was born at Agenebode and I drank Agbo, but I'm reluctant to drink Agbo today because I know if I have malaria, that if I tell me to take chloroquine targets the hemosome where the parasite stores heme. Heme is toxic to the parasite, and if Plasmodium does not sequester it into that food vacuum, the parasite will die. And so what it does is to take all the heme as it's destroying the hemoglobin in the cell and store it there. What chloroquine does is to prevent the formation of that hemosome in the parasite. And so heme becomes available to kill the parasite. That is the mechanism of action. I understand Agbo you can do when you are hot, you get it can mellow it down. There are so many things. What is critical is focus on how that thing is going to work and achieve your medication in a manner that is compelling to somebody who is in the medical field, the orthodox medical field. I was at the NIH to review grants sometime a few years ago. One of my friends, he happens to be of Nigerian background, told me that he had these capsules, they can kill this, they can kill they can kill this virus, they can kill this virus. And I convinced this American that his laboratory should try it when Ebola came in. And they don't do that. The guy was from the US Army Medical Research Institute in Maryland there. We met at the study section where you review grants that are awarded to all these schools, medical schools and research centers. And when he got the product from this guy, he called me the next day. He said, "Hey, Joe," he said, "It's nothing. It just killed everything. It just all the cells and so you are not going to allow something like that to be used in orthodox medicine." So it's I'll be reluctant now to recommend somebody a trial of something an Agbo-like concoction. You know why Fauci did not approve of chloroquine? There was no specific antiviral mechanism of action that was being targeted. But when remdesivir came in, remdesivir is a nucleoside analog. Nucleoside is used to make the viral RNA, the genome. If you introduce that nucleoside analog into the virus does not replicate anymore. That is the mechanism of action. That is the way of the modern medicine. You have to target the mechanism of action. If not, you just drink phytochemicals and all that. They make you feel good, general well-being supplement. That is fine. I take all sorts of vitamins. I take also turmeric and all of them. But if I want to cure malaria, I will look for anti-malaria that will kill Plasmodium. I think that is my point. Thank you. If Professor Iwu can, if we can redirect whatever we do to target mechanism of action of whatever we are producing, they will gain greater international acceptance.
Thank you very much. So I don't know if Professor Iwu has
please, Professor, the compound is called andrographolide. Just Google it. There are 72 publications on this mechanism of action. 72 publications. Google it. I was also at Walter Reed Institute of Research, the same place you said your friend was. I also reviewed grants for the NIH. Nobody is talking about your Agbo here. We are talking about a pure labdane diterpene with proven structure. 1,000 plus publications by others, not me. Can that be a waste? As I said, just Google ANDROGRAPHOLIDE. I'm talking about general Googling. ANDROGRAPHOLIDE. It's a very well-known compound, one of the oldest molecules that ever known. All we contributed that we isolated it from andrographics, and we were able to show that it is the active molecule. We're also able to show the mechanism of action. Are you trying to tell me that U.S. Army Research Institute of Infectious Disease is not the utmost research center for antiviral studies? Even the CDC cannot ever do without the AMRID. So Professor, what I'm saying, just don't have an enclosure of the mind. Google what I just told you. The father is coming from your fatherland. That is why you are thinking that it is Abo. All the things coming from Nigeria are not Abo. We also have compound from Nigeria. We have sophisticated medicines from Nigeria. We can also synthesize chloroquine from Nigeria. The issue here is that let us also try to contribute to global solutions, not always talking down on ourselves. Nobody's talking about Abo here. The mechanism of action is known. Its chemistry is known. That was, please, if you can spend time and Google ANDROGRAPHOLIDE. The other one is Garcinia cola, which is the common bitter cola. There are so many publications, and I've also written 3 books that is used in the study of pharmacology, and nobody has come back to say that those books will not be used in their class because they were written by a Nigerian. No, they are of a world-class standard, and that's why they are used. All I'm trying to remove from our mind is that enclosure of the mind because we are Nigerian, because we're African, that we cannot play the global standard. It is easier to stay overseas in the comfort of somebody says hard work and then criticize what is happening here. And you just dismiss it as Abo. Nobody's saying Abo. We're talking about pure compound here. A compound, as I said, Google ANDROGRAPHOLIDE, andrographolide. That's all I have to say about that. And saying that you don't like clinical trial just because you think it's Abo.
Thank you very much, Professor. And I think that is a very fine place to leave it. We'll say once again, special thanks to Governance Index for making this possible. Governance Index, once more, is offering this public service to drive the needed national conversation to facilitate purposeful and impactful leadership in government and organizations for social change. The Governance Index is promoted by Elomba Communications and Njenje Media Limited. On this note, I will say, gentlemen, ladies, very much thank you for spending this hour, close to 3 hours, or rather already 3 hours here with us. Now, the conversation must continue. We will be publishing this. Watch out, the newspapers this weekend and to next week. This is a serial that's going to continue. Next week, we will be the same time having this conversation on a different topic. Thank you once more, Professor, immensely. Professor Maurice Iwu, immensely. I know I'm here to thank you once more for agreeing to join this conversation. And we have learned massively a lot from your wealth of knowledge. The same with every single participant that has taken the time to be with us this evening. There were requests that was made, Professor, if we can take that offline, made by Dubem, if we can keep in touch, because at the end of the day, that is that needed conversation that we are here to force. If it's going to be that this conversation would create the avenue needed, that you have to speak to Femi Bajabiamila, whom Dubem represented, that is a welcome development, and that is a way to go. We must engage. We must engage in order to get a very fantastic result. On that note, once more, I remain Mazi Tochukwu Ezoke. Remain blessed and good night, everyone.